Good morning, and welcome to the video discussion review for the William Carlos Williams discussion board. And I'll tell you, I really enjoyed most of all the discussion about the young housewife. How interesting that some of you look at that woman in that poem and think that she's begging for attention. And um, and there was just a lot of rich discussion about that poem, and that is an interesting poem. It's real hard to separate out William Carlos Williams' actual life from that poem. If you know about William Carlos Williams, he was a doctor, and it was really pretty ordinary and usual for doctors to make house calls during the time that this poem was written, and so it wouldn't be in any way immoral or inappropriate for a solitary figure like the speaker in the poem to be driving about in the mid-morning. And if you know about William Carlos Williams, also he was, he was unfaithful in his relationship with his wife. He had several, affairs and was known to sleep around. So it's kind of hard to separate that out from the poem. But I think we sort of have to, because in this class we're trying to focus mostly on the poems themselves. We're doing a more what we call formal criticism, just looking at the form of the poem. And the discussion about the fallen leaf was very interesting, right? Because fallen suggests, a fall from innocence, whatever. And then for the speaker to be driving over fallen leaves at the end that are dried up doesn't seem like a good thing to me. But I like how Tricia kind of focused on her husband's house. She noted the sort of the balance of power and the kind of relationship that must have been there. I liked what Sue did, where she clarified the difference between the speaker, who is this solitary figure and references to himself with I, and the husband. But I did enjoy the discussion. I would read Joey's fallen leaf response, and uh, and I do like Melissa's idea about what's imaginary and what's real. Is he imagining what's behind the walls of the husband's house, or has he been in there before? And it's a very interesting poem. It's innocent enough, the situation. However, there does seem to be this underlying tone of sexual tension there. The Red Wheelbarrow, Sue and Linda, you want to reread their threads. Those were very good. Linda brings up an important idea. Remember, no meaning but in things. And so the focus really is on the red wheelbarrow, the rain, and the chickens. And so much depends upon that. Why? I don't know. Susie talked about, there is this story behind that poem that he was sitting up in the room, William Carlos Williams was, with a little girl who was very sick, and he was looking out the window. So much depends on that, tied into whether or not that little girl was going to live or die. Whether or not that's true, let's focus on the poem. And for some reason, so much depends on those things, which reinforces again, like Linda says, no idea but in things. This is just to say, I really love Joey's post, how those two nouns, the plums and the icebox alone, evoke such strong reaction. You can taste and feel these cold, delicious, juicy, sweet plums. And and to me, that kind of proves a little bit, William Carlos Williams's point, like there's no meaning but in things. And Robert also concurred with that idea. With enjambment, Melissa, I really appreciate you trying to use some of that poetic terminology. Enjambment is the idea how one line runs into the next without a break. And so there's not really a pause, even though there's a line break. It's the idea that that line runs into the next line. So just sort of be careful with the idea of enjambment. It's actually a lack of a pause, even though the word comes at the end of a line and we tend to want to pause there. So maybe there is a focus for some reason on a particular word that's at the beginning or end of a line, but there's not much of a pause. I do like the point about the lack of sincerity, about the tone of this is just to say. This is just to say. I think it's an interesting discussion. I think the speaker seems less than sincere. It's like they were just too darn good. And I'm sorry, but really, you couldn't blame me. And so I like how Tricia pointed that out. Okay, I have a conference call coming on here, so I'm going to leave for now. But remember, don't repeat ideas if you want full credit, and use standard English. Capitalize at the beginning of sentences and use the proper punctuation. If you got less than 20, it means you either repeated a point or you didn't move the conversation forward. You just said, good job, I agree. Explain why you agree, how it's different from what you thought in the first place. And use standard English if you want to get full points. Good job, and I'll be back in touch later.